So thanks for joining today's webinar, Making the Case for STP. So this is the second webinar of a series we kicked off last month and we'll be running through early December. The overarching focus is really how suppliers can get paid faster by automating your invoice-to-cash process. So if you missed the first one, which was the STB benchmark test, you can find the recording on globus.com, so be sure to check that out. Just some quick introductions before we get started. So I'm Carrie Klaus, and I sit on the product side of the house at Globus. And I have a specific focus on the adoption and usability of our solutions. So I have the privilege of working with clients and prospects, as well as some of their enterprise customers directly, really all over the world, to understand the challenges as well as the opportunities in today's B2B invoicing and payment space. So the primary goal of today's session is to arm you with some data points for making the case for straight-through processing. But in order to do that, we thought it would be helpful to ensure you have a good understanding of exactly what Globus is doing with our clients in order to drive some of the success metrics that we'll share later in the webinar. So we'll spend just a few minutes kind of sharing what we're doing in the invoice-to-cash space, and then spend the majority of our time actually showing you a demo of our enterprise invoicing and payment solution. And then we'll wrap up with the impacts that that solution is having on some key metrics, such as invoicing costs, DSO, and things like customer retention as well. So there was an interesting study that surfaced last month from a company called APQC that posed the question, how many full-time equivalent employees do organizations need to complete the AR process? So the obvious thought here is, to measure the level of efficiency by the number of people it takes to get the work done. So the fewer the people it takes to do the job, the more likely that the team is doing the work the right way. So the most recent data shows that the best performing organizations, and that's defined by those who need the least labor to process AR, have 2.4 FTEs for every $1 billion in revenue. So on the flip side, those that are the least efficient actually require 7.4 FTEs. So right around 3 times as many people to process the same dollar amount of the receivables. Another interesting point that came out in the recent results is how this compares to the findings from 2016. So the top performers actually reported the same number this year as last year, so that 2.4, while the bottom last year was actually at 10.1. So the question is, what's changed? And the data actually shows that organizations with the fewer FTEs processing AR received a larger percentage of receipts electronically. So those top performers are now receiving 95% of their receipts electronically or automatically, and they were already at 93% last year. But that bottom performer group had obviously much more room for improvement. So they actually moved from 64% to 92% to electronic receipts. So once they started making that shift, you can see that it made a significant difference. So the obvious question is, what are the top performers doing differently than the bottom performers? So typically when companies set out to improve AR efficiency, it really opens up a slew of upstream processes and problems that are ultimately landing in AR. So if accurate and easy to ingest invoices were being, delivered on time, if customers trusted those invoices enough to make automatic payments without, inquiries and disputes coming through, if the required remittance data was provided, then obviously life would be a lot easier for the AR team. But for most, that's, far from reality. So, multiple and disconnected systems, lack of accessible data for the customers themselves to be able to pull, really no viable option for going paperless, hundreds or thousands of inquiries and disputes, and then of course, manual and really error-prone payment processes for both the supplier as well as the customer. So again, all of these problems, ultimately have an impact on how and when your customers pay you, and then obviously how your cash application is performed. So Globus's unique approach is to make invoicing and payments customer-centric instead of invoice-centric. So if you see these blocks on the left-hand side, really each one of these represents a different division or a different product within a large supplier. So this could be due to mergers and acquisitions, or the implementation of new billing systems tied to product rollouts. So as invoices are produced and delivered, a specific business customer could receive multiple invoices coming from these multiple systems, really at different times during the month as well. And speaking specifically on the enterprise front, it's not uncommon for us to see enterprise customers receiving, 20 invoices, even upwards to over 100 invoices per month from the same supplier. So what Globus does is we aggregate all of these into our invoice-to-cash platform, and we really allow the customer to have a tool where they can easily review, approve, pay, as well as even dispute their invoices along the way. And then once they've paid those invoices, the Globus platform then orchestrates the settlement advice across all of the different systems for the supplier as well. So our vision is really to automate the entire invoice to cash process. So obviously that includes, again, not only the distribution of the invoices and the application of payments, but also how the customers are engaging with those tools as well. And we really feel like straight-through processing is the way to do this. So again, the ultimate goal is really no paper, no manual processes, and automated financial actions. So that really speaks to the payments and the reconciliation. So at Globus, we've seen the biggest challenge, as well as the biggest opportunity, is really in moving the enterprise customer base to an electronic invoicing and payment model. So when you're specifically targeting, these large and complex customers, the variance between what you're delivering via your invoices and your data, and what they require to perform their AP processes can really, vary greatly. So what we've done at Globus, and really where most of our clients have seen the greatest ROI, is to really focus on delivering features and functionality that not only increase efficiency back into your organization, but also increase the efficiency for your customers. So the goal is really to make it as easy as possible for them to connect your invoices to their AP processes, and then their payments back to your AR. So there's definitely some other features that enable this connection, but these 6 have really proven to drive, high digital adoption among our existing base. Again, if your online experience is simply a replica of your paper bill, there's not much value add from a customer's perspective. But if you can help them to be more efficient as well, they're much more inclined to adopt your digital approach. And then obviously that has greater impacts for you as well. So with that, I'm gonna hop into the demo and actually show you some of this functionality in action. So we'll click over here. And so I am actually going to be logging in as an enterprise customer of a supplier. So the example we have today is for a telecom provider. So again, large enterprise customer, typically responsible on the AP side of the house for processing invoices. So everything from reviewing, seeking approval from multiple stakeholders, and then ultimately following through with the payment process and those reconciliations that have to happen on their side. So here we are on the home page. So typically we have kind of a dashboard from a trending perspective, so you can see total spend from month to month. We also have a few things that are, quick identifiers of some exceptions. So again, the goal is to really allow the customer to personalize these types of items to allow them to say, what's within reason and what's not within reason. And again, make it much more efficient for them to be able to know where to take action. So I'm going to click over into the invoices. And you can see here we have a pretty comprehensive list of our invoices for the current month. So again, as we were walking through, the alternative to this is, again, typically enterprise customers are receiving invoices through multiple channels. So they may be getting paper bills for some products, PDF emails for some products, They may have online access to portals for some specific products, but it's not necessarily common for all of the invoices to be provided in a central hub such as this. So again, this allows the customer to come in, and I'll just click on one of these invoices so you can see kind of the view of a single invoice. So pretty similar to what you would expect kind of from a summary paper bill or a PDF bill. So you can see our current charges, any balance forward, and a pretty high level view again of these charge categories. From here, if the customer had some specific questions, they could actually drill down a little bit and expand that invoice to see some of the additional charges behind that. The other great thing about this is it really allows the customer to continue to kind of dig in and self-investigate. So again, if we had a question as to why this had kind of jumped from the last month, they could actually click through directly into here and have all of the detailed data that has added up to that. So again, the goal around this is really to allow them to self-serve and to be able to kind of self-investigate to eliminate a lot of those inquiries that are coming into the call centers or through the account managers. The other thing from here is that they have the ability to easily compare. So we typically implement with 13 months of data. We can span up or down depending on either segment-wide requirements or even down to specific customer requirements. So for demo purposes, we just have additional 1 month, but this compare feature is really valuable, and again, a really quick analysis for them to be able to see, okay, how have things changed month over month, and where do I need to spend my time investigating a little bit further. The other thing that is great within the application is the ability to export. So all of the invoices can be exported, as well as some of the reporting that we'll get into. But essentially, depending on where you are in the application, you can click export. Again, here we have PDF, CSV, and XML options. So it really allows the customer, again, to not only have that digital view, but if they do have a requirement to have something offline, they can pull it all from the same application. So I'm going to go back into the invoices section. And I'm actually going to sort down and say, maybe I've gotten approval for all of my product accounts, and I want to be able to roll those invoices into one and have one final look before I make a payment. So you can see here that I've actually got all of my invoices now that I've assigned to my product department. And I can actually click this button here, and it's actually going to allow me to build what we call a virtual invoice. So essentially now, instead of those 5 or 6 individual invoices, now I've consolidated that into one single invoice. So similar view as what we had with the single invoice. But now if we wanted to, again, we could expand this down. We could actually view the detailed account details behind that. So again, a lot of different views for the customers to be able to choose from. So then from here, if all of this looks good and I've gotten my approvals from my internal workflows, then I can come in and say, okay, let's make a payment. And this is one of the really valuable features within the application, especially from an enterprise perspective. So a lot of times, if online payments are available to enterprise or even down to the mid-market, it's kind of adopted a consumer or SMB approach where it's a per invoice payment structure. So again, for an enterprise that is receiving 100 invoices each month, that can be quite taxing in terms of coming in and submitting those payments individually. So we actually allow the enterprise, again, to group the payments like we did. So we've grabbed all of our product invoices, and now we can actually choose to submit that as either one single payment transaction, or we can actually decide, we want to send these through as separate transactions. And what the real power here is, a lot of what's happening is customers, especially on the enterprise side, are actually making these what we call personalized payments, regardless if you're providing the capability or not. So maybe they're writing one single check that's including all of these invoices, or again, making a call into the account management team and they're processing this on their behalf. But essentially, what's happening is a lot of times that remittance capture is lost in translation. So it's either not sent through in the same format or the required format, or it's missing information. And that's where a lot of investigation and time, again, based on, or a lot of the time for the AR team is cycled back to have to go and track that information down. And so that's where this really comes into play, is having that digital capture and allowing them to not only submit the payments online, but also to be able to directly feed that information back into your side of the house to be able to reconcile against all these different systems. So other thing I wanted to point out, when we noticed, or when we were in the invoices section, you noticed I went to view the products. So one of the other key things, again, especially from an enterprise perspective, is being able to support cost allocation. So again, right now, what's happening in today's world is customers are having to pull the invoices and then manually kind of re-transcribe those to align them to their actual, general ledger or their cost allocation perspective. So what Globus does is we actually have an integrated hierarchy functionality that allows the customer to actually build that within the tool. And then that can serve, again, as kind of an output to feed back into their external systems, as well as be able to leverage it within here for things such as reporting, again, making payments across a certain group. So we have this tree builder, and I'm just going to point it out real quickly. But essentially, it's similar to a normal corporate hierarchy that you would see. And again, it allows the customer to come in and add additional nodes to this, and then from there actually come in and add additional accounts and services. So that's assign those accounts and services to those areas within the node. So for example, if I needed to add a new department under marketing, let's just say that, we have an events team and the GL code is, let's say 2003, we can add that in and you'll see that will show up here now within our hierarchy. The other thing from here, so now I can actually come in and see which accounts and services have been assigned to this. So this is probably one of the biggest pain points we hear both from a supplier perspective as well as a customer perspective, is not being able to have this view accessible. So essentially this allows you to be able to see which accounts and services we've allocated to which areas within our hierarchy that we've set up. It also allows you to easily be able to see as new services and accounts come in, they fall into this unallocated bucket. So again, for a large AP team that is managing multiple services, multiple accounts from a certain supplier, this becomes a really valuable tool from kind of a monthly maintenance. And the ability for them to do this directly themselves versus relying on the supplier, again, really helps from a supplier perspective as well. So from here, once we have that hierarchy set up, they can actually run a cost allocation report directly from here. So each month, again, we've set up our structure, we've assigned our accounts and services, and the cost allocation report can, I just clicked on it, can be run, within seconds to pull up, based on those categories that I've assigned, and kind of align all of those costs and charges. Again, this can be exported out, so exported and then imported into an external system. The other thing to note is this, as well as all the other reports, can actually be set up to order as well. So you can schedule these to come out, let's say, on a monthly basis. You can send them to yourself, and then they can also send them, to additional people within their organization. So there's a lot of flexibility, again, not only in terms of viewing information, but also sharing and kind of automating the dissemination of that information as well. So the other thing from a reporting perspective, sometimes customers need a little bit more detail or a different view in order to validate, some specific charges, for example, or maybe they have some internal reporting that they need to do and cycle back to. So we do have summary and detail reporting in here as well. So Typically, we have, especially from an enterprise perspective, we have a set of kind of default reports that we go with initial implementation. So you can see, kind of an invoice charges by account. And this is just kind of a tabular view. You can see the account number, the invoice issue date, charge type, description across all of those accounts. Again, all of these can be ordered, printed, shared as I talked through. And again, all of these can be viewed at that level that we've set up within our hierarchy as well. The other real value with these reports is that you can actually allow the customers to build their own reports. So again, the idea of having a set list of reports that would meet the requirements across all of your enterprise customers is not really reality, right? So there's a lot of varying business requirements and things that people want to see. So our approach to that is give them all of the data and allow them to build the reports that they want to be able to see. And by doing that, we've actually been able to reduce that onus on your internal team. So again, whether it be from an AP perspective, sometimes there's specialized billing teams involved, account management is getting involved in those. It really allows the customers to do it themselves, which is actually the way that they want to do it. The other thing within these reports is you can actually see them at a graph level as well. So I showed a tabular report, but you can actually come in, here's the usage charges by type, and actually see some graphs. So they have some flexibility again, how those presented and how those are shared as well. So the one other thing that I wanted to point out is, and actually from here as well, you can click through directly into that detailed data that I was talking to previously. So if we click through into here, you'll actually be able to see that detail view, and you can toggle into full screen view to be able to see all of that data across and all of those accounts. So again, it's not only providing the invoices in a way that can be consolidated and kind of structured the way they want to view them, but in parallel, you're providing all of that detailed data for them to be able to do investigation and validation on their own as well. So we'll quickly go over into the setup section. I just wanted to point out a few things that I'd kind of mentioned on. If we look into user profiles, so another great functionality piece is the ability here to manage users. So this not only allows them to define who would have access to this information, but they can also define at what level and at what permission. So for example, if you want your head of product to be able to log in and see those invoices specifically aligned to his organization, you can actually set that using the hierarchy. You can also set, again, permissions based on who can make payments, who can edit reports. So lots of flexibility there that allows the customer to manage that versus, again, putting that onus on the supplier. Paperless billing. So this is a big one, obviously, that's tied to kind of the ROI of getting people to go digital. So from here, the customers can actually manage this themselves, which obviously, triggers a back-end process on your side. But essentially, they can come in, and once they're comfortable with the digital view, they can go account by account or select all of their accounts and actually change these over to paperless. So again, putting the control in the hands of the customer versus having to have an upfront process on your side as well. And then lastly, from a payment information. So again, this is super important in terms of kind of the trusted electronic payments space for enterprise. So this allows them to actually come in and enter, again, multiple different payment sources. So whether it be a bank account or a credit card, they can have multiple ones stored and again applied to specific areas within the organization. So it really allows them to have an efficient way to manage those, as well as when they move to a state of automation to be able to actually apply those again to specific accounts and invoices. So with that, I'm going to hop back into our presentation for just kind of a wrap up and moving into kind of how we, so we've seen the value from an enterprise customer's point of view. So I wanted to walk through kind of the value for you, as the supplier. So at Globus, we work with our clients to track success across the entire invoice-to-cash process. So to put these numbers in context, this is really representative of a client who has around 1,000 enterprise customers, and they've now reached close to 90% digital and paperless adoption among this specific segment. So from an invoicing cost perspective, they've actually been able to reduce the cost per invoice, so printing, postage, delivery, by upwards of 70%. And you can see from kind of a quantified value what that ends up leading to for the specific customer. When we move further to the right, so verify digitally, this is where support costs tied to things such as inquiries and disputes, as well as some of that custom reporting and specialized billing that I mentioned during the demo come into play. So here we see a 50% reduction in the inquiries being raised. And that's really around, again, giving those end users the ability to now self-investigate, and they have improved visibility to be able to see all of that information across all of their invoices now. And then on the same note, this visibility really is important as well as on the supplier side when it comes to resolution times. So instead of internal teams, searching through multiple systems for invoices or data, they can actually just use the Globus tool to identify the charge or invoice in question. And that's actually helped from a resolution time as well. So I think we've cut that down by 50% as well. And then as customers move into the payment stage, there's a bit of an evolution that we see. So just moving from a paper bill to online actually has reduced DSO by 50%. And then once customers are making payments online and then ultimately moving to an automatic payment state, those days continue to decrease. So we're definitely tracking that and seeing a lot of improvements around that. Again, not only from just online payments, but actually just moving from that paper bill into the digital state. And then if we go full circle, kind of to where we started our discussion, the adoption of electronic payments, which includes the automated remittance capture that we talked about, this is where we really start to see how those top performers are performing the same transactional task with really 2/3 less, of the FTEs. So this now allows, for more focus on strategic finance tasks such as, performance management, proactive decision-making, a lot more analytics versus kind of managing the day-to-day transactional tasks that are happening today. And then last but not least, automating all of these processes has a significant impact on how your customers choose or choose not to do business with you. So in this specific scenario, we actually realized a 3% reduction in churn, which was directly attributed to, the ease of use, trust, and really the personalization of the invoicing and the payments. So this has resulted in over, $12 million in revenue retained. Similarly, that retention also meant less cost tied to regaining, the revenues of lost customers. So we see that from an acquisition cost as well. And then another interesting point to note is not just the choice of doing business with you, but also how much business they give you. So for this specific case, it was actually noted that enterprise customers who had adopted the digital approach were growing their business with the supplier on average 25% more than those who remained offline. And the thought here was that given the increased visibility and the ease to manage, they were actually moving services from some of the supplier's competitors over to the supplier, again, because it was so much easier to manage the business with this supplier. So, obviously some of these are pretty substantial numbers, and, enterprise customers are not easy to come by, and are obviously contributing, a huge amount to the bottom line. So we'd welcome the opportunity to have some follow-up discussions and actually share some more of the details behind these numbers. And we'd love to see and kind of help you figure out what the upside potential is that you have tied, to your specific invoice to cash process. So I've included my contact information as well as Rob from sales. So feel free to reach out directly with any questions you have, or you can always find us at globus.com and get through to us that way as well. So thank you so much for joining. And just a quick plug, don't forget to join us for our last webinar of the series. We've got one coming up on STP innovation. So we're actually going to share some insights from our Globus research panel on what's to come for 2018 and beyond. So thank you.